This relates directly to addiction because I've spent some time at addiction treatment clinics and talking to people in that community. And it's very clear that, of course, there are a huge number of factors that play into why people become addicted and relapse, et cetera. But if you can get at people's ability to control their anxiety and their feelings of peak states and happiness, you don't guarantee, but you help reinforce the possibility that they're going to get sober and stay sober. As an addict gets more tethered to the idea that some substance is the thing they need, the progressive narrowing of the things that bring them pleasure, and everything else kind of falls away like portrait mode on the phone, they're essentially in a state of high stress trying to meet that dopamine need all the time. And they don't see other possibilities. The reason I mention not just stress and treating stress to get at addiction, but also pleasure is that we've also seen this. When do people relapse? When they're feeling really good. When they're feeling really lousy and stressed, and when they're feeling really good. Yeah. They've been sober for 5 years. We hear about this in the news, usually from celebrity examples. People have been doing great. All of a sudden, they're back in treatment. And you're like, what happened? Well, what happened was the dopamine circuit from other things, maybe a great life event or things are going well, or stress, the loss of a job, everything crashing, puts our visual system and the rest of our brain into a myopia. We literally become nearsighted, and the dopamine system says, that's the only thing that's gonna get me out of the mode that I'm in. They literally don't see the other possibilities. So some of the work that I'm starting to get involved in now is to try and inform the addiction treatment community, the trauma community, that there are ways to use action in the body to move people out of states of myopia, nearsightedness, and this is kind of a cognitive nearsightedness, and allow them to start parsing their time perception differently. It goes right back to time perception. When an addict needs something, their sense of time is fixed to the retrieval of that thing, or the reaching that thing. And then when they can dilate their sense of time, they realize they have time for other options. But until you can dilate that, there's really no chance, frankly.
You can't find a way in.
You can't find a way. You can tell somebody you're going to lose your kids and they'll do it anyway. And that just tells us we need another route to it. And so one of the things I think is powerful is to think about, how can we leverage the visual system? How can we leverage the diaphragm system? In the same way that you would tell somebody who's has cancer or needs a surgery of a certain sort, like we need to leverage certain technologies. Well, we need to leverage certain inborn technologies of respiration and vision to be able to access states of mind that will allow us to make better choices. For the addict in that really nearsighted view, fixated, there is no other choice. And I think those early years of skateboarding and being, feral, it showed me that the people I knew that became addicts, and frankly, I know some adults who have become addicts, even who have very quote unquote functional lives. It wasn't just them. Those people, we like to think they're making a bad choice, and they're making a bad decision. It's unclear to me whether or not they have a choice in those highly myopic states of mind. And so what we need to do is we need to dilate their perception of the world around them. We need to dilate their perception of time. They need to learn how to relax themselves so they can actually see other options. And it all relates to how the visual system and the breathing system relate to autonomic function. Addiction is the perfect sort of laboratory to do this, and it's so important, I think, because if it were simply the case that people just needed family support, and which they do, and they needed encouragement, and they need discouragement about making the wrong behaviors, then we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
It's so much more complicated than that.
It's so much more complicated.
The thing, I think all of those are really powerful tools and important things to look at with respect to the addict mentality or that disposition. There has to be a level of self-awareness in that addict that the decision to pick up the drink or to use the drug begins so far in advance of the actual behavior. By the time they actually pick up that drink, there's no getting in the way of that. Like, that decision has so much momentum behind it that it's almost impossible to reverse. So a breathing technique or any technique at that juncture is unlikely to be successful. So it's about recognizing, when that state is starting to shift in that direction, whether it's days or hours or weeks before the behavior choice to intervene at a place and time when you can actually have an impact.
I agree. I think that it's always an uphill battle with addiction, at least at first. But even, just given the numbers on relapse, I think what was it that someone once told me? I don't know if this is actually true, but for most people, but he said, a recovered addict told me, that every day he tells himself, no matter how far I drive, I'm always the same distance from the ditch.
Yeah.
The addiction community has
There's so many awesome.
There's so many great takeaways from it. Yeah. What's interesting is there's some verbiage around the yogic community that is very valuable. I can't recall it off the top of my head, but they talk about the great support that one can get from learning to access brain states of timelessness, sleep being very restorative, wakeful, deliberate disengagement being very restorative, maybe meditation, maybe through yoga nidra, maybe through simple, quick breathing techniques, but being able to dilate and contract one's sense of time and not being locked to one kind of space-time regime. The ability to recognize that I'm not seeing clearly, right? I see what I see, but I don't know what I don't see. The ability to introduce that understanding for somebody can be very powerful. And I think we need to give them tools that they can look to very quickly. I don't think we're ever going to have a treatment for addiction that's in the form of a pharmaceutical, like one pill. Because if you start tapping into the dopamine system itself, you start degrading other aspects of life. So I think one of the reasons why addiction treatment is so complicated is that you need many elements, but the elements that come from the person themselves are ultimately the most important ones, of course. And I think physiology and neuroscience does have some tools that can lend support to that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that every couple of years you see new science emerge on addiction, and there's some new protocol, and 12 steps constantly getting thrown under the bus, and 12 steps what got me sober, and I'm very rooted in that community. I remain open to other modalities and protocols, and super interested in seeing where all of this is going. But I think it is important to appreciate how complex it is. Like, there's a trauma element to it. There's a behavioral modification element to it. There's a emotional, like, how do you find a way to anchor this person to a life path that has meaning and purpose, and all of these things inform this complex soup that's going on in their head that's dictating whether they're going to pick up a drink or not.
Yeah, and and I love the neuroscience community. With it's been my family and home for many years now, and the people working on addiction are motivated from the right place, and they are working exceedingly hard. But there are a lot of data now that show, for instance, there are complete genetic changes in the cells that can, and the pathways that control dopamine and reward, and that's all wonderful to understand. But meanwhile, I think there are enough tools out there that they need to be aggregated in a way that's structured and that addiction treatment communities can leverage.